Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Intuitive Angling, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to spend some time with me, because I know there's so many dang YouTube channels out there. It's hard to, you guys don't have time to watch everything, so I really appreciate you guys tuning into Intuitive Angling here. Guys, today we're going to be talking about something that you hear me mention a lot on the channel, and we're going to be talking about wind and how it affects your bass fishing, because the whole topic of wind and bass fishing is a very complex deal. It's like I could do a 3-hour long, video just on wind, because there's so many variables with it that determine if wind is actually a positive or negative. So in today's video, I sort of want to give you an overview of that a little bit and sort of explain to you wind or how wind affects bass and how you can use it to your advantage, and how you can get a better understanding about the techniques and areas you need to fish based upon how the wind's blowing. So it's the topic of today's video. Also, guys, I just want to invite everybody, if you haven't had a chance, you guys hear me talking about this, you guys are probably sick and tired of hearing it. Just wanted to invite everybody to please use and bookmark my Tackle Warehouse link I put in the description. Guys, stuff like that is the reason that these YouTube videos I do are actually up on YouTube. If it wasn't for those links, probably wouldn't even be doing the videos. So if you want to support the channel, that's a really good way to do it, is just go into my description of every video and just use the links I put in there. Much appreciated there. Okay, guys, it's sort of like I hardly know where to start on this, because there's so much to it as far as terms of how you want to address wind and the situations around wind. Because when you're talking in terms of how you want to fish in the wind and how bass are affected by wind, either negatively or positively, you have to combine the wind with everything else that's going on, because the wind has a direct correlation as far as how you need to approach it, as far as the techniques based upon the water clarity and the water temperature that is associated with that wind, the time of year, water levels, time of day, everything like that. It makes a big determination in it. So without getting into like the fine nitty gritty with this, to get it, like I said, it would make it last 3 hours. I want to touch on some of the bigger points of this to sort of give you a good foundation with it. So probably the best way to do this is I want to go through the 4 seasons of the year, and I want to give you guys some examples of how wind will help you out or hurt you, and how you may want to approach it a little bit. So let's start with the winter. Let's go to winter, spring, summer, fall, and I'll sort of go over a little bit with that. Out of all the seasons of the year, the wind in the wintertime, as far as when you're talking about wind blowing, it probably has the least amount of effect as far as helping you. Sometimes it can actually hurt you in terms of catching fish. In the wintertime, for the most part, that's one of those times of year where I don't want the wind blowing very much. A lot of it has to do with it's just very uncomfortable if it's cold and it's windy out there. But the main thing about it is that wind, any wind that generates some type of surface disturbance in the wintertime, that doesn't help you out any as far as catching fish, simply because of the water temperature. The fish, when you're talking about wind activating or not making fish active, the wind doesn't help you out in the wintertime at all, simply because, again, that water temperature and the mood and the personality of the bass. So in general with that, the cooler the water that you have, a lot of times the less wind that you have is going to be better. Not to say that when I talk about less wind, it's not like you don't want like slick, calm condition, but sometime in the wintertime, it seems like the best conditions for me have been some type of just a light breeze that just makes the water just have some ripple on it. Not glass smooth, but just a ripple, not enough to really even move your boat. That's, to me, is the ideal winter situation. Anytime that water temperature is sort of under, 50 degrees, specifically. But as the water warms up and you start to get into spring, summer, and fall, that's when wind plays a lot bigger role. And it slowly plays a bigger role, because to me, when you're talking about wind blowing and activating fish and making fish bite better, I have found personally that you need to have water temperatures in the mid-50s. Once that water temperature starts getting into the mid-50s, it doesn't matter if it's March or November. It can run anytime the water temperature is over 55. Wind is something that usually helps out. The stronger the wind, not a super hard wind, but just a little bit stronger wind will help activate those shallow fish a lot more. So usually what happens in a deal like that is, like, when that water temperature is over 55 degrees and those fish start to move a little bit shallower, the fish feel a lot more secure when you have some type of wind overhead, because it's just one of those things about bass fishing is when it's calm out there, the fish are usually a little bit spookier and more finicky. And anytime that wind blows a little bit, it almost sort of acts like cover a little bit, and it makes those shallow fish a little bit more active.
Can you tell me where my iPad is? I don't know.
I'm not sure where your iPad is, but
please.
No, I'll be in a second. Okay. Elijah comes out every time I do a video here. So, but when we're talking about wind blowing, as far as activating those fish in the springtime, and in the spring we're talking about water temperatures usually between, say, 55 to 70 degrees. I usually like, say, like a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind. It seems like a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind when you're fishing shallow, especially with reaction baits like spinner baits, jerk baits, crank baits, chatter baits. That really helps out a lot, as long as you have water visibility over, say 1.5 feet or 2 foot. If you got dirty water, and one of the things you'll find out about dirty water, guys, is that if you got water visibility that's really dirty, like less than 1.5 feet, wind does not really help you out that much. It may help you out a little bit in the heat of the summertime, but for the most part, you don't want much wind in the dirtier water. It sort of deactivates the fish a little bit. Not to say that you can't catch them on windy days, but it's not that big of a factor. You're going to find that the wind is more of your friend as far as when it blows a little bit harder, if the water is a little bit cleaner and warmer. And that starts a little bit in the springtime of the year. So in the springtime of the year, that's when I'm really, really looking for those days out there where you have a southerly airflow, 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, where I can power fish those bigger, again, big spinner baits, big square bills, power fishing, moving baits like that. Now, another thing with that, as far as when you're talking in terms of the wind, you have to also consider the wind direction. We'll get into that before I get into the summertime fishing. Now, let me talk a little bit about wind direction. In bass fishing, you're going to find that the bass are most active if you have wind from a southerly or a southwesterly or sometimes a westerly direction, because normally when you have a southerly airflow of some extent, you got a stable or some type of a falling barometric pressure, which it just activates the fish more. And if you have a north wind or an east wind, that's usually associated with a rising barometric pressure. Fish are a little bit more inactive. That's just the reality of the situation. And a lot of times that is also connected to the sky conditions, because based upon the type of front that you have, sometimes after a front pushes through, it bluebirds off and it's completely clear. Some other fronts that you may have in there, after the front rolls through, it's cloudy for a couple days. So the association of the cloud cover with the wind direction has an impact on it. Now, I'll give you an example here. Let's say, a cold front rolls through. You've had a cold front's getting ready to roll through. You got a 15 mile an hour wind out of the south. Fish are biting pretty good. Once that cold front comes through and that wind switches around to the north, if that wind is blowing again 15 miles an hour or so, but if you have a bluebird sky with that 15 mile an hour wind, the fish are going to get really inactive. They're going to get dormant. They're not going to bite as good. But if you have the type of a front that you have a 15 mile an hour north wind with cloud cover with it, sometimes those fish will continue biting. So there's a lot of variables that just, determine that. It's not like you can go into a book and say, this is what the fish do when the wind's blowing like that. That's just sort of an overview with it. But as far as wind direction, that is a good indicator with it. There's an old saying in fishing that, when the wind's out of the west, it blows the bait in the fish's mouth, and when the wind's out of the east, the fish bite the least. I haven't really seen that to be true. It's more about the cloud cover associated with that and the barometric pressure. Now, as you get into the summertime, the summer is, in my opinion, the probably the third most important time of the year to have some type of a wind. Again, you're dealing with warmer water. You're dealing with fish. Half the fish population are a little bit shallower in a lake. And any time that you have wind, it's going to, again, activate those fish. So In the summertime of the year, when I'm fishing shallow structure like cranking rock or cranking lay down trees or something like that, it always helps to have a little bit of wind, especially again if that water temperature is not real dirty. So that's just going to be another way to activate them. The only difference between the wind in the springtime of the year and the wind in the summertime of the year is that the wind in the springtime of the year a lot of times will activate those larger fish because there's more females up shallow. But by the time the summer rolls around, a lot of your bigger fish are actually a lot deeper, and the smaller to the medium-sized fish are shallower. So that wind is going to activate those a little bit shallower fish. And if there is one time of the year where wind will help you in a little bit more off-colored water, it's probably the summertime of the year. Not dirty water, but it's like I've had some pretty good days if the water visibility is about 12 inches and I'm fishing some shallow cover with some wind on it with that. One of the things that I also will tell you about wind in the summertime of the year is the direction of the wind in the summertime has the least amount of effect on it. It's like in the spring and the fall time of the year, the direction of the wind has a big influence on how active or not active the bass are. But in the summertime of the year, it doesn't seem to matter. I really don't notice much difference from a north wind to a south wind once that water temperature gets above 80 degrees. It just doesn't affect the bass quite as much. But what I really want to talk about here, guys, is the fall time of the year. In my opinion, the fall time of the year is the most important time of the year where you have to consider wind. It would be the fall time of the year, number one, the spring second, summer third, winter last. The fall time of the year has a lot to do with the speed of the wind. It's like you can have days in the fall time of the year where you have no wind and the fishing can be great, and you can have days that are super windy and the fishing can be great. One of the times that you want a situation where you don't have any wind is if you're fishing a topwater lure. Topwater fishing in the fall time of the year is really good with no wind, because if you're fishing a topwater, especially in some cleaner water situations, it gives those fish a chance to see that topwater from a long way away. Prime example is you're fishing something like a Zerspook out on a main lake point where you got 4 or 5 foot of clarity and you've got a calm day. That'll pull those fish from a big distance away to hit that. But if you have a windy day, not quite so much on it. But the thing that I really like in the fall time of the year is I like those windy days, those 20-mile-an-hour days where I can get up shallow on those areas where that wind is hitting the bank and that water temperatures is in the upper 50s to low 70s, and power fish those windy banks in the fall time of the year, burning a spinnerbait, burning a chatterbait, burning a crankbait, throwing a glide bait, a swim bait. One of the best times of the year that you can catch them and take advantage of that wind. So again, it's like that's just an extremely brief overview with it, but just sort of to give you a foundation again. It's like the warmer the water and the clearer the water, the more a strong wind is going to help you. And the colder the water and the dirtier the water, the more that a strong wind is going to hurt you. Those are the extremities. Everything else is in between that you have to sort of equate that to that. So mainly just remember that. Pay close attention to your water clarity and your water temperature along with the wind, and that gives you a good indication of the techniques to use. In general, another thing to remember is the windier it is, the more that your moving baits are going to work better. Your power fishing baits, your spinner baits, your crankbaits, chatterbaits, and the slower the wind, the better your slow baits are going to work, your worms, your jigs, your shaky heads, and your topwaters. That's just an extremely brief overview of wind. And I may do an extended hour-long version on the Advanced Bass Fishing channel I do on wind. Maybe I'll do that this week, and you can refer to that for a little bit more detail. So anyway, guys, hope it helps out. We'll talk later.